I stood there in the heat, my suitcase still gripped in my hand as their car sped out of the rest stop without me. The smell of gasoline and melting asphalt clung to the air, but nothing burned hotter than my daughter's last words. "You'll figure it out, Mom." After raising her, funding her wedding, and paying for every mile of this trip, after giving her everything, I was left behind like a forgotten receipt. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The highway shimmered in late summer heat, that pale mirage glaze that makes the air itself seem untrustworthy. Evelyn Hale sat in the back seat of her own car, a rented white SUV she'd booked with her credit card, of course, while her daughter and son-in-law argued about directions. Lauren's voice carried sharp as glass. "Mark, if you'd just follow the GPS instead of pretending you know shortcuts." "I do know shortcuts," Mark snapped, drumming the steering wheel. "Every time we do this, you start micromanaging." Evelyn watched the green of Wisconsin roll by, the tall pines flickering like silent witnesses. She said nothing. She'd promised herself not to. The trip had been billed as a family reconnect weekend, Lauren's idea after months of distance. Evelyn had paid for the cabin, the groceries, even the gas, anything to keep peace. But the silence between front and back seat was already thick with old grievances. When the blue highway sign for rest area, 1 mile, appeared, Evelyn quietly said, "I could use a restroom stop." Lauren didn't look back. "Perfect. I need a break from the bickering." They pulled in under a canopy of oaks. The lot shimmered with RVs, pickup trucks, and sunburned travelers stretching their legs. Evelyn stepped out carefully, adjusting the brim of her sun hat, her knees stiff from the ride. Ethan, her grandson, stayed close, scrolling nervously on his phone. Inside the restroom, the air smelled of pine cleaner and travel fatigue. When she returned, the argument had resumed outside. Mark stood by the open driver's door, his voice low but clipped. "She's exhausting, Lauren. It's like babysitting your mother." Evelyn froze behind a parked van. Lauren's reply came brittle. "We'll just get there first. Say we were checking in." Mark's laugh was short and dry. "She'll manage." They turned when Ethan approached. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing, honey," Lauren said too quickly. "We're just figuring out directions. Grandma, you can ride with Ethan in his car." "Oh, wait, that's right. He didn't bring one." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" "We'll go ahead," Mark said, already climbing in. "We'll text you the address again once we're there." The SUV door slammed before she could answer. The tires threw up a puff of dust as it rolled out of the lot and merged back onto the highway. Evelyn watched it until the taillights vanished into the glare. She waited. 10 minutes, 20. She told herself they'd come back. Maybe they'd just gone to buy supplies. Ethan paced, checking his messages. "They're not answering," he said finally, voice small. 2 hours later, the sun had turned orange at the edge of the tree line. The vending machine hummed behind her. A family with matching t-shirts laughed nearby, their car doors slamming in unison as they left for somewhere else, together. Evelyn's phone battery blinked red. She dialed Lauren again. Voicemail. Mark's number. Voicemail. She called the cabin office. The clerk said a Hale family had already checked in and requested an early dinner package. She hung up without a word. Ethan's eyes filled. "Grandma, what do we do?" Evelyn steadied herself, spine straightening as if a switch had flipped. "We go home." She opened the trunk, lifted her own suitcase, her initials EH in faded thread, and carried it to the Greyhound stop across the lot. The ticket clerk gave her a long look but said nothing when she handed over her card. Ethan rode beside her in silence, head down. As the bus rolled toward Madison, the window glass trembled with each passing semi. Evelyn's reflection stared back, small, pale, unblinking. Somewhere between the highway markers, humiliation hardened into something colder, cleaner. By the time they reached the city lights, she'd already begun listing what she'd paid for in her head. Every receipt, every tank of gas, every charge that had her name attached. She carried her suitcase up the apartment stairs alone that night. June Carter's porch light flicked on next door. June stepped out in her robe, arms folded. "Lord, Evelyn," she said, taking in the scene, the travel clothes, the blank eyes. "Where are the rest of them?" Evelyn set the suitcase down with care. They left, she said simply, halfway to the cabin. June's mouth twisted. They treated you like lost luggage. Evelyn looked past her to the quiet street, the glow of porch lights stretching down the block. Then it's time I start keeping better track of what belongs to me. The words hung there, faintly trembling, as the night insects began their rhythmic hum, a soft, relentless reminder that something had just shifted, and there'd be no turning back. The morning after the rest stop felt like the air itself had been vacuumed out of Evelyn's small apartment. The suitcase sat half unpacked by the door, a single sandal still dusted with gravel from the rest area. Madison's light filtered through the blinds in narrow stripes that cut across the kitchen table, where her checkbook, glasses, and unopened mail waited. Ethan slept on the couch, his jacket folded under his head. His phone kept buzzing, a steady, guilty rhythm. Evelyn didn't ask who was calling. She already knew. She sat down with a quiet click of her chair and turned on the old desk lamp. The yellow light carved the edges of her hands into delicate, working shapes, the hands of someone who'd spent decades behind a receptionist's desk, filing, logging, recording. Order was her native language, and when the world tilted, she defaulted to the one thing she could still control: the paper trail. The bank portal took forever to load on her aging laptop. When it finally did, her stomach twisted. Transaction after transaction, dates matching the trip, lined the screen like small betrayals. $328.50. Airbnb Lakeside Cabin. Hale Reservation, $174.96. Lakeshore Bistro, 2 guests, $58.10. Scenic Boat Rentals, prepaid. Her finger hovered above the mouse. The charges weren't hers. She'd been sitting on a Greyhound bus when they'd dined lakeside under her name. She printed everything. The old printer wheezed to life, coughing out sheets that landed like confession slips on the table. A creak from the couch. Ethan stirred, rubbing his face. "Grandma, what are you doing?" "Checking who's been shopping with my money," he hesitated. Then sat up, eyes wide with a guilt she recognized instantly. I saw Mom using your card at the gas station before we left. She said she'd pay you back once the trip was over. I didn't think." Evelyn's breath caught, but she kept her tone level. "And she used it again at the cabin." Ethan nodded, miserable. "She said you wouldn't mind since it was all family stuff." Evelyn slid a printed statement toward him. "Family doesn't hide what it borrows." He lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." "I know you are," she said softly, and reached across to squeeze his wrist, once, gently, before withdrawing. "But we'll need proof. All of it." June knocked on the screen door just after 9, holding a thermos of coffee and her morning paper. She took one look at the table, papers spread like a map of war, and raised her eyebrows. "Well," she said, setting the thermos down. "Looks like somebody's building a case." Evelyn didn't smile. "Just counting what's mine." June poured them each a cup, sat down, and scanned the printouts. "They ran up meals, rentals, even the cleaning fee. Classy. I thought if I didn't make a fuss, it would pass." Evelyn's voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. June snorted. "People like that don't stop when you stay quiet. They stop when the bill lands." Evelyn reached for her notepad, drew a neat line down the page, and began listing. Date, amount, description, evidence printed. Her handwriting, tight and deliberate, filled the sheet in orderly rows. "Keep every scrap," June said, tapping a finger on the paper. "Numbers don't forget." Evelyn's lips tightened. "Neither do I." By late afternoon, her dining table looked like an accountant's bunker. Receipts in labeled envelopes. Bank printouts clipped in. Sequence. She called the credit union, her tone polite but unyielding. "Yes," she told the representative. "I'd like to freeze one of my cards. Unauthorized family usage. No, I won't be renewing the joint travel rewards account. I'll open a new one. Personal use only." Ethan listened from the doorway, his face pale. When she hung up, she turned to him. "I'll need your help tomorrow. Photos of the receipts, digital copies in case anything goes missing." He nodded, voice small. "Okay." June stood, gathering her purse. "I'll bring over my old filing box. Hard copies. If they try to twist things, you'll have timestamps." As the door closed behind her, the apartment grew still again, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the laptop fan. Evelyn stacked the receipts in her new ledger, smoothing each page flat before closing the cover. Outside, the sun was sliding down behind the lake, casting a dull orange band across the windows. Evelyn stared at her reflection in the glass, this small woman with tired eyes and a mind sharpening like a blade honed on betrayal. She opened her planner and wrote at the top of a fresh page, "Unauthorized charges, proof ongoing." Her pen didn't tremble. Then, just as she turned off the lamp, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Lauren. "Everything okay, Mom? Hope you got home safe. We'll settle things later." Evelyn read it twice, her mouth curving in a faint cold smile. She deleted it without replying, then underlined her last entry in the ledger twice. Next, the account I blocked. By the time Monday arrived, Evelyn had slept barely 3 hours. The ledger sat open beside her breakfast plate like a silent witness, pages of numbers, names, and times inked in her tidy script. Outside, Madison's sky was washed out gray, the kind that flattened the world into routine. But for Evelyn, nothing about this morning was routine anymore. She buttoned her cardigan, clipped her bank folder shut, and told Ethan, "We're going downtown." The credit union smelled of carpet cleaner and coffee, the kind of neutral scent designed to calm nervous people. Evelyn wasn't nervous. She felt clear, almost clinical. The young teller at the desk wore a plastic name tag that read Hannah. She smiled too easily. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Hale?" "I need to change who has access to my accounts," Evelyn said. "Immediately." Hannah began typing. "All right, looks like you've got a joint rewards account. 2 authorized users. One listed as Lauren Hale." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "That's the one. Would you like to remove her access or close the account entirely?" "Both," Evelyn said. "And I want all new cards issued in my name only." The teller blinked, then nodded, her fingers moving faster now. "I just have to warn you, if she tries to use any attached cards, those will be declined. There could be some, confusion." "I imagine there will be," Evelyn said evenly. "That's rather the point." Ethan stood behind her, shifting his weight. His hands were jammed into his hoodie pocket, his face pale with anger and shame. "They used you, Grandma," he muttered. "They don't even think it's wrong." Evelyn turned, her gaze softening for a moment. "We'll let the numbers prove what words can't." Hannah printed out the forms, sliding them across the desk. Evelyn read every line before signing. Decades of typing letters and filing invoices had taught her to catch the small tricks hidden between sentences. When she handed the pages back, Hannah looked faintly relieved, as if she'd been helping a client quietly detonate a minefield. "You'll receive confirmation by mail within 5 business days," the teller said. "And a note. Your travel rewards account shows a pending booking attempt under your name. Do you want that canceled too?" Evelyn met her eyes. "Cancel everything that says Hale Family. From now on, there's just me." The click of her pen cap sounded final. June arrived that afternoon carrying an armload of supplies, her old leather address book, a packet of legal envelopes, and a box of color-coded paper clips. "I brought reinforcements," she said, dropping them on the kitchen table. "You're about to make their lives miserable in the most respectable way possible." Ethan looked up from the laptop, where he was scanning receipts. "Grandma's already halfway there," Evelyn smiled thinly. "Organization isn't revenge, June. It's evidence." "Call it what you like," June said. "Just make sure it bites." They spent the next hour at Evelyn's dining table, the same one that had once hosted Sunday breakfasts and birthday cakes. Now it was a command center. June flipped through the address book, reading aloud phone numbers while Evelyn dialed one after another. "Car rental company," Evelyn said into the phone. "I need to report unauthorized use. Yes, under the name Evelyn Hale. No, I did not rent a vehicle past the 20th. Please log that dispute." She hung up, then immediately called the cabin owner. Her tone stayed calm, her words deliberate, as if reciting an affidavit. "No, sir, I did not authorize my daughter to charge the full balance. Yes, I'd like written confirmation of the payment method used." Ethan's phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. "Mom keeps calling," he said quietly. Evelyn didn't glance up from her notepad. "She'll keep calling until she needs something. Let her wait." June leaned back in her chair, watching her friend work. "You always did know how to keep order." Evelyn's pen didn't pause. "They thought I was done paying attention. That was their mistake." She jotted one final line, capped the pen, and stared at the neat grid of ink before her. For the first time since the highway, she felt something like calm, not peace, but the steadiness of someone who's begun building the trap instead of waiting to fall into one. When she returned the receiver to its cradle, her voice was steady. "All right. I've logged reports with the car rental, the cabin, and the bank. Tomorrow I'll go to the credit union to sign the formal report." Ethan frowned. "Don't you already trust them to fix it?" "Trust is what got me robbed," Evelyn said. "Now I want signatures." The printer whirred again, spitting out copies of every confirmation email. Evelyn gathered them into a manila folder labeled Unauthorized Charges, Active. As the daylight drained from the window, she flipped the folder shut with a soft snap. The apartment felt smaller, heavier, like the air before a storm. Her phone buzzed once more. This time, the caller ID flashed Lauren Hale. Evelyn let it ring out. A voicemail notification appeared. She pressed play. "Mom," Lauren's voice, sugar-sweet, dripping with entitlement. "You've made things complicated for everyone. Just stop before you embarrass yourself. We'll handle the money stuff, okay?" Evelyn replayed it twice, each time quieter, calmer. Then she turned to Ethan. "Save that message. We'll need it." Outside, thunder rumbled over the lake, low and distant. Evelyn looked toward the sound, her reflection hardening in the glass. "Let them think I'm embarrassed," she said softly. "They haven't seen what I look like when I start keeping score." The rain had rolled in overnight, turning the sidewalks into long mirrors. By morning, Madison was gray and dripping, and Evelyn Hale sat at her kitchen table in her robe, the steam from her coffee curling like thought itself. Her ledger was open beside her, the pages dense with handwriting that only she could fully decipher. Every entry had a purpose now, dates and dollar amounts, transforming into the bones of a defense. She picked up her fountain pen, the same one she'd used at work for 20 years, and began drafting the letter on cream stationery. Her cursive was small, measured, the kind of handwriting that demanded to be taken seriously. To whom it may concern, this correspondence is to document and dispute a series of unauthorized transactions connected to the lakeside cabin reservation under the name Hale Family, Evelyn H. The charges were neither approved nor executed by me. Attached are supporting bank statements, timestamps, and recorded calls, verifying my absence at the location during the period billed. I request a full refund for the fraudulent usage and a confirmation of the payment source listed in your records. Respectfully, Evelyn M. Hale. She read it twice, signed it once, then folded the pages with the precision of a woman sealing away a truth that could no longer be twisted. June arrived mid-morning, an umbrella dripping in one hand and a bundle of envelopes in the other. "You're doing it the old-fashioned way." "Paper leaves a trail," Evelyn said, slipping the letter into a certified mail sleeve. "Emails can be ignored. Signatures can't." June nodded, watching her affix the green and white label. "You'd make one hell of an auditor." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Too bad I waited until 73 to start acting like one." They drove together to the post office, the wipers ticking back and forth like a metronome. At the counter, Evelyn paid the postage, watched the clerk stamp certified in red across the front, and slid the envelope through the slot. It landed with a soft thud, small sound, large meaning. "Done," she murmured. "Step 1, June corrected. The reply came 3 days later in a pale blue envelope bearing the cabin company's logo. Evelyn slid it open with a letter opener that had belonged to her late husband. Inside was a polite but puzzled note. "Dear Mrs. Hale, we've reviewed your claim and found that the reservation was processed under Hale Family, Evelyn H. The system lists your card as the primary payment method, though the contact information matches another party, Lauren Hale. Please clarify the discrepancy so we can proceed." Evelyn stared at the letter until the words blurred. The arrogance of it. The way her daughter had casually wrapped her mother's name around her own indulgence like camouflage. She switched on the laptop and began composing an email. The click of the keys was brisk, almost musical. To Lakeside Management, please find attached 1. Certified mail receipt. 2. Account statement showing unauthorized charges. 3. Confirmation from my credit union that said transactions are under dispute. To clarify, I, Evelyn Hale, did not book, attend, or authorize any stay at your property during the build period. The individuals responsible used my name and payment method without permission. I expect confirmation of cancellation and reimbursement within 10 business days. EH. She reread it twice, trimmed every unnecessary word, and pressed send. As the email whooshed off into the void, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of loyalty and quiet fury. Mom and Dad are still pretending none of this happened, he said. But he hesitated, pulling out his phone. I saved this before they deleted it. He tapped the screen and played a voicemail. Mark's voice crackled through the tiny speaker, oily and dismissive. She'll fold, Lauren. She always does. We'll get her later. She's predictable. Evelyn's face didn't change, but something in her shoulders did. A subtle lift, the tightening of resolve. Send that to me, she said evenly. Ethan nodded, thumb shaking slightly as he forwarded the clip. June, who'd been drying her umbrella near the sink, turned. What was that? Evidence, Evelyn said, of intent. She opened her ledger and added a new page. Voicemail, October 12th, 11:48 p.m. Subject, Mark Hale, recorded by Ethan, statement, we'll get her later. Her pen moved with icy precision, her breath steady. When she finished, she closed the ledger and rested her hand on the cover for a moment, as if sealing it with thought. They think I'm predictable, she said quietly. Let's make sure they're right, just not about how. June gave her a long, measuring look. You're starting to sound like someone who needs a lawyer, Evelyn didn't argue. Do you still have that name you mentioned last year, the one who helped your cousin with her estate? Harold Green, June said. Practical type. Doesn't scare easy. Good, Evelyn replied. Let's see if he scares them. That evening, Evelyn printed the email chain, slipped the voicemail transcript into her folder, and wrote in her planner, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Appointment, H. Green. The rain had stopped by then. Outside, the lake was perfectly still, black glass reflecting the apartment lights. She stood there a long moment, her reflection staring back, older, smaller, but certain. On the counter, her phone buzzed again. A new text from Lauren. Mom, don't make this messy. You'll only hurt yourself. Evelyn deleted it without opening the thread. Then she turned off the kitchen light, the ledger still on the table, like a loaded weapon waiting to be picked up again. Harold Green's office didn't look like the sort of place where lives were rearranged. It looked like the waiting room of a small-town dentist. Soft carpet, framed photos of Madison's Capitol dome, and a single plant that had outlived its pot. But the moment Evelyn stepped inside, she could feel the quiet machinery of order humming beneath it all. Harold rose from behind his desk when she entered. A tall man with careful movements and a voice that didn't waste syllables. Mrs. Hale, he said, shaking her hand. June spoke very highly of you, and a little nervously of what you're planning. Planning? Evelyn set her purse down. No, Mr. Green, I'm documenting. He smiled faintly, gesturing to the chair across from him. That's what I like to hear. The blinds were half closed, slicing the light across stacks of legal binders. On his desk sat a single leather-bound portfolio, with her name already embossed on a temporary label. E. Hale, Estate Review. He opened it with the kind of care a man gives to a loaded weapon. You said on the phone you'd like to update your will. When was it last revised? 1998, she said, before Lauren was married. He nodded. Then it's long overdue. Evelyn removed her glasses, folded them neatly beside her. My daughter and her husband have made certain decisions lately that make me question their stewardship of anything with my name on it. I'd like that corrected. Harold regarded her carefully, weighing tone and subtext the way good lawyers do. Understood. Tell me how you'd like to reallocate things. For the next hour, Evelyn spoke with the steady rhythm of someone cleaning house, one shelf at a time. Savings, the pension, her modest condo, the old car, all accounted for. But as the list unfolded, the shape of her intention became unmistakable. Lauren Hale and Mark Hale, Harold repeated, writing the names down. To be fully removed from all bequests. Completely, Evelyn said. No joint accounts, no residual benefits. Nothing that ties them to my estate in any way. He raised an eyebrow. And your grandson? Ethan is different, she said, voice softening. He's done what's right, even when it made him miserable. I want a trust in his name to fund his education, but conditional. He must stay clear of his parents' accounts and not transfer funds to them. If he violates that, the remainder returns to the estate. Harold's pen paused mid-sentence. You've thought this through. I've been thinking for years, she said. I just didn't know it until now. He continued writing, the scratch of ink against paper sounding deliberate, final. When he looked up again, she was staring out the window toward the courthouse across the street, where people moved like tiny distant figures, each carrying their own small justice. And the rest of the estate? Harold asked. Evelyn turned back. The remainder goes to the Dane County Community Travel Fund. They sponsor high school students who can't afford class trips. Seemed fitting, don't you think? They left me behind on a trip of my own. For the first time, Harold allowed himself a smile. That's a poetic kind of bookkeeping. I prefer accurate, she said. By evening, the documents were ready. Evelyn sat at Harold's desk again, now with a notary present. The papers gleamed under the brass desk lamp, dense with clauses, witnesses, and signatures. She reviewed every page, her finger tracing the language that carved her intention into permanence. When she reached the signature line, Harold slid the pen toward her. Are you certain? Evelyn took it without hesitation. No more freeloading on my name. Her hand was steady as she signed. The ink dried crisp and blue, an anchor on the page. Harold countersigned, stamped, and sealed. Filed within the hour, he said. Once it's logged, this version supersedes all others. Irrevocable unless you change it again. I won't, she said simply. He closed the portfolio, slid it across the desk. Then, Mrs. Hale, consider your life's record balanced. June was waiting in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine. When Evelyn stepped out, she rose instantly. So, Evelyn handed her the sealed envelope. Done, and witnessed. June's eyes flicked to the embossed seal. You actually did it. I said I would. Back at the apartment, June followed Evelyn to the bedroom, where a small wall safe was tucked behind framed photos of Lauren's childhood. Evelyn placed the will inside, turned the dial, and listened for the double click of the lock. June, ever the pragmatist, pulled out her phone. Mind if I take a picture of that? Just in case. Evelyn didn't stop her. Evidence of intent, she said. The phone clicked. June pocketed it. You're scaring me, in a good way. Evelyn looked at the safe door, fingers resting on cool metal. They spent my money trying to make memories I wasn't part of. Now I've made one they can't erase. Later, when June had gone and the apartment had settled into its nighttime hush, Evelyn poured herself a small glass of sherry. The rain had begun again, tracing silver threads down the window pane. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, resolved. She lifted her glass in a silent toast, not to victory, but to clarity, and whispered to the empty room, predictable, am I? The safe's red light blinked once in the dark, steady as a heartbeat. And somewhere in another house across town, Lauren's phone buzzed with a bank alert she didn't understand yet. Account access revoked. Evelyn smiled. The storm had only just begun. The envelope from the county courthouse arrived on a Wednesday, thick, official, and uninvited. Evelyn found it wedged between a grocery flyer and her electricity bill, the kind of bureaucratic ambush that could sour an entire day. She slid it open with the same letter opener that had sealed her will. The language was clinical and cruel all at once. Petition for competency evaluation, filed by Lauren and Mark Hale, on the grounds of potential diminished capacity and undue influence. Evelyn let the paper rest flat on the counter. The implication she wasn't in her right mind slid through her like cold wire. For a long moment, she simply stood there, breathing evenly, her fingers pressed to the edge of the sink as the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. When Ethan came home from class, he found her at the kitchen table with her ledger open. Not panicked, not shaken, just preparing. They're saying you're unfit? He asked quietly, disbelief clouding his voice. They're saying I'm thorough, she corrected, and they can't stand it. He frowned, sinking into the chair across from her. Mom's been texting me nonstop. Says you've lost it, that you're letting June and some lawyer twist you around. Evelyn lifted her gaze. And what do you believe? Ethan hesitated, then said, I've seen your notes. You don't forget anything. That night, Evelyn pulled out an old spiral notebook and labeled it in her sharp handwriting. Evaluation prep, memory, logic, finances. She treated it like one of the certification tests she used to take for work decades ago. Each night she reviewed her bills, wrote mock interview answers, timed herself balancing checkbooks and recalling phone numbers. June would drop by with flashcards, dates, addresses, birthdays, turning her living room into a quiet training ground. "You don't have to overdo it," June said one afternoon as Evelyn rattled off bank routing numbers from memory. "I'm not overdoing it," Evelyn said. "I'm studying for my freedom." The evaluation took place in a beige office near the county courthouse. The psychiatrist, a man named Dr. Caldwell, was polite but deliberate, the kind of professional who spoke in smooth tones, meant to coax truth or confusion, whichever surfaced first. He smiled as Evelyn sat down. "Mrs. Hale, this is just a standard competency assessment. We'll review memory, reasoning, and your understanding of financial and legal matters. It isn't adversarial." Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. "It's a test someone else asked for. That makes it adversarial enough." He nodded, conceding the point. For 90 minutes, she answered every question calmly and precisely. Names of state senators, the price of milk, the definition of a trust fund, the steps to cancel an unauthorized transaction. When he asked her to subtract by sevens from 100, she smiled faintly. "I balanced books for 30 years, doctor. You can pick any number you like," he chuckled. "All right, 93, 86. By the time they finished, Dr. Caldwell was the one flipping through papers to keep up. He leaned back finally, studying her. "I think I've got everything I need, Mrs. Hale. Your cognitive scores are excellent. You handle financial and legal material with impressive accuracy." "Good," she said, standing. "Send it to the court and copy my attorney." A week later, Harold Green placed the stamped report on her table. "The judge will see this before the hearing," he said. "It's airtight." They overplayed their hand. Evelyn skimmed the first line. "No evidence of diminished capacity. Demonstrates exceptional memory, reasoning, and independent decision-making." June whistled low from across the room. "You always remembered the little things. Now they remember you." Ethan, sitting beside her, scrolled through his phone. "Mom's losing it," he said softly. "She keeps texting me that you bribed the doctor, that you're being manipulated. I blocked her." "Good," Evelyn said, sliding the report into her ledger. "Let her talk herself in circles. I'll stay on the record." The courthouse hearing was brief. Harold handled most of the talking, citing the doctor's evaluation and the notarized will. Lauren's attorney mumbled something about family concern, but the judge cut him off. "Mrs. Hale's capacity is not in question," the judge said, gavel cracking once. "This petition is dismissed with prejudice. Future filings of this nature will be considered harassment." Lauren's face went rigid in the gallery, her lips pressed into a line that couldn't decide between fury and disbelief. Evelyn didn't look at her once. When the gavel fell again, she gathered her folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked out beside Harold and June, the murmur of the courtroom fading behind her. Outside, sunlight glared off the courthouse steps, dazzling and merciless. "Well," June said, slipping on her sunglasses, "that's one test you aced." Evelyn smiled, small but certain. "Now they know I can remember. Next, I'll make sure they can't forget." As they crossed the plaza, her phone buzzed again. A new voicemail from an unknown number. She didn't play it yet, but the preview on the screen showed the first words. "You think you've won, but you don't know what we can do." Evelyn slipped the phone into her pocket, the faintest smile touching her lips. "Let's see," she murmured, "what they try next." The wind tugged at her coat as she walked toward the car, steady and unhurried. Every step measured, every move recorded. Her quiet storm building. It started with a picture. Lauren had always known how to weaponize a camera. Angles, filters, sympathy disguised as lifestyle. The photo showed her and Mark at a lakeside table, wine glasses raised, captioned with a single line. "When family forgets kindness, you learn to move on." Boundaries, teach, do better. By the next morning, there were dozens of comments, half pity, half gossip. Someone asked if this was about her mother. Lauren didn't answer directly, only replied with a broken heart emoji and, "Let's just say we had to leave Granny behind." It spread like wildfire in their small circle of Madison acquaintances. Neighbors, church friends, co-workers. Screenshots jumped to community groups and private message chains. Evelyn first heard about it from the grocery clerk at the co-op, who tried to sound casual. "Saw some posts online, Mrs. Hale. Hope you're doing all right." Evelyn smiled politely, though her stomach went cold. When she got home, she asked Ethan to show her. He hesitated but handed over his phone. The glow of the screen painted her face in pale blue as she scrolled through the thread. Comments speculating, defending, judging. "That poor woman, left all alone? I heard she's being manipulated." "Don't believe everything you see. Lauren's always been dramatic," Ethan muttered. "Mom's been at it all day. She posted this meme too. Look." It was a cartoon of an elderly woman sitting at a bus stop, luggage at her feet, captioned, "Some people are determined to be victims." For the first time, Evelyn felt something deeper than anger, something sharp and cold that made her steady hands tremble. She closed her eyes briefly. "She's not just trying to humiliate me," she said. "She's trying to rewrite it." June arrived that evening, holding her phone like a weapon. "You've seen it, huh?" Evelyn nodded. "Half the city has." June slammed her purse down. "Then we make sure they see the truth, too." Harold called later, his tone cautious but firm. "Evelyn, whatever you do, keep it factual. No names, no direct accusations. You've already got the law on your side. Don't jeopardize that." "I'm not out for blood," she said. "I just want the record straight." That night, she sat at her desk, the same lamp glowing soft gold on her ledger. She drafted her post with the precision of a report, not a rebuttal. To the community members who've reached out, thank you. For those who've seen misleading information about me online, I'd like to share a few facts. The trip in question was booked and paid for by me. I did not abandon anyone. I was left behind at a rest stop. I've since taken appropriate legal and financial steps to resolve unauthorized charges. Below are the records verifying this. She attached images, receipts, bank statements, the cabin confirmation email, all neatly redacted for privacy. No bitterness, no names, just proof. She reread it twice, then pressed post to the neighborhood board. For hours, the replies rolled in. At first, tentative sympathy, then outrage on her behalf. "That's unbelievable. How could anyone do that to their own mother? This woman's receipts are airtight." Knew something smelled off about that lakeside post. By midnight, the balance had shifted. Lauren's earlier posts were suddenly flooded with skeptical comments and fact-check screenshots. Across town, Mark deleted his account entirely. Lauren changed hers to private. Ethan watched it unfold on his laptop, jaw tight. "They're spiraling," he said. "Mom's texting me like crazy, telling me to take her side or she'll cut me off." Evelyn looked at him, calm but firm. "Don't answer. Let her hear the silence." A few days later, June organized what she called a reset breakfast at the local diner. Half social, half strategic. Flyers read, "Community coffee hour, stories of strength." Evelyn resisted at first. "It feels like a spectacle," June winked. "It's called owning the narrative, sweetheart." When Evelyn arrived, she found the back booth already filled with neighbors. Faces she recognized from the grocery store, the library, the walking trail around the lake. They greeted her warmly, offering pie and quiet solidarity. June stood to introduce her. "You all know Evelyn Hale," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "She's had herself a rough few months, but she's come out sharper than a tax form." The room chuckled softly, easing the tension. Evelyn smiled modestly, though she could feel the weight of every pair of eyes. "I only did what anyone would do, kept records, and stayed honest." "Exactly," June said. "And that's why she's not just a neighbor, she's an example." The applause was small but sincere. Later that night, Evelyn returned home to find new messages flooding her inbox. Not pity now, but admiration, offers to volunteer. Donations for her idea of creating a local respite space for caregivers, an idea she hadn't even announced yet. She turned to Ethan, who'd been deleting the last of Lauren's photos from social media. "Seems your mother's story took a turn she didn't plan," she said. He grinned faintly. "Guess you went viral for the right reasons." Evelyn closed her laptop and exhaled slowly. Outside, the neon glow from the diner's sign flickered through her window, soft, steady, like approval from the night itself. Then her phone buzzed again. An unknown number, a text this time. You think the internet's your friend? Let's see what happens when I tell them what you've done. Evelyn stared at the words, the faint smile returning. Let them talk, she murmured. I've got the receipts. The first snow of the season had dusted Madison overnight, turning the street into a watercolor of pale gray and white. Evelyn Hale was up early, as always, ledger balanced, coffee poured, the soft hum of her laptop filling the quiet. She wasn't expecting anything unusual, but then, halfway through her morning news scroll, a headline on a local real estate site froze her mid-sip. Lakeside Cabin, Hale Family Getaway, now on the market. Her hand trembled just slightly as she clicked. The photos loaded slowly, one by one, like old memories being pried open. The first was the dock at dusk, the same dock she'd once paid to repair. Then came the living room, white curtains, new cushions, her old throw blanket draped neatly over the arm of the couch. She could almost hear Lauren's voice in her head, bragging about our cabin by the lake. The listing description was syrupy and self-serving, a cherished family retreat, lovingly maintained by the Hale family, perfect for making new memories by the water. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. The asking price was modest, far lower than market value, a quick sale, a patch job for whatever hole Lauren and Mark had dug for themselves. June knocked at the back door, a gust of cold air following her in. You're up early, what's that face for? Evelyn turned the screen. They're selling the cabin, June leaned in, squinting. Under their name, too. You paid the down payment on that place, didn't you? Evelyn nodded slowly. And most of the renovations. The bank transfers are in my ledger. June let out a low whistle. They're flipping your money into their escape plan. Not if I get there first, Evelyn said, her voice steady as steel cooling. Harold Green listened without interruption as Evelyn laid out the facts, screenshots, receipts, and the property listing. His office smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, and his expression was unreadable. You think they're selling to liquidate? He asked. I think they're desperate, Evelyn said, which makes them sloppy. Harold leaned back, tapping a pen against his desk. If you want to buy it, we'll need to do it quietly. They can't see your name anywhere on the paperwork. Otherwise, they'll reject the sale or inflate the price. I don't need them to know, Evelyn said. I just need it to be mine again. He smiled slightly. Then we'll set up a holding company, something clean and local. He scribbled on a legal pad. Lakeside Retreat Holdings, LLC. June, who had tagged along, grinned. That has a nice symmetry to it. Evelyn met Harold's eyes. Draw it up. The next afternoon, the three of them sat around Evelyn's kitchen table, filling out the buyer forms. The room smelled of printer ink and peppermint tea. June typed the application details as Evelyn dictated. Every word measured, her pen tapping lightly on the table. I'll apply for a small personal loan, Evelyn said. Enough to make the offer look ordinary. No lump sums, nothing flashy. Harold nodded. Good. I'll structure the LLC as sole ownership under an intermediary. No trace of your family name. When it came time to sign, Evelyn paused over the digital form. It's poetic, she said. They abandoned me on that highway, and now they'll have to sell me the place where they left me behind. June gave a short laugh. You couldn't write it better if you tried. 2 days later, Evelyn walked into her credit union with her folder of documents. Hannah, the same teller from before, greeted her with recognition and perhaps a flicker of respect. Back again, Mrs. Hale? Business this time, Evelyn said, sliding over the loan application. Short term, secured. All funds traceable. Hannah reviewed the paperwork. Purpose of loan. Evelyn's smile was faint but unyielding. Property investment. Within the hour, the loan was approved. Evelyn left with an envelope of documents and a clear conscience, every penny accounted for. That evening, Ethan sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, his face pale with frustration. Mom's ranting again, he said. She's saying you manipulated the court, that you made her look crazy. I tried telling her to stop, but... Evelyn looked up from her ledger. Don't argue with her, Ethan. Just state the facts. He hesitated, then opened a draft email on his phone. I was going to send this. He slid it to her. Mom, Dad, do whatever you want. But you used Grandma's money, and she has proof. Stop before you make it worse. Evelyn read it once, then handed it back. Send it. He pressed send, his hand shaking slightly. She reached over, resting her palm lightly on his. You did the right thing. Truth doesn't need to shout. At midnight, Evelyn refreshed the property listing one last time. The Inquiries tab now showed a new submission. Lakeside Retreat Holdings, Madison, WI. She closed the laptop, her reflection faint in the darkened screen. A small woman, tired but luminous with purpose. In the silence of her apartment, the refrigerator clicked off, leaving only the wind outside and the soft, steady ticking of the wall clock. Evelyn whispered to no one. You left me at that cabin once. Let's see how it feels when it leaves you. The cursor blinked on the confirmation page. Offer submitted. Somewhere across town, Lauren and Mark were about to learn that ghosts could buy property too. The offer was supposed to be anonymous. It almost stayed that way. A week after submitting her bid, Evelyn received an email from Harold marked confidential. Inside were 2 short sentences that changed the air in the room. Competing offer filed under Hale Family Holdings, LLC. Registered to Mark Hale. She reread the message 3 times, her pulse steady but her fingers tightening around her mug. They're trying to buy it back through a shell company, she said aloud, though only the refrigerator was listening. When June arrived with scones an hour later, Evelyn had already printed the documents and circled the proof in red ink. Of course they are, June said, dropping into a chair. They can't stand not being the ones holding the keys. Evelyn poured her coffee slowly. Then I'll hold them higher. Harold called that evening from his office, his tone both cautious and impressed. They've matched your first bid, but there's room to maneuver. I can raise funds through a community-backed line of credit, quietly. Folks around here still remember your years at the clinic, Mrs. Hale. People trust you. Evelyn hesitated. I won't take charity. It's not charity, Harold replied. It's faith. Consider it an investment in justice. The line went quiet. Then she said, make the call. By Friday morning, snow was melting into slush, the roads slick and shining. Evelyn sat at the credit union again, her 3rd visit in 2 months. Hannah, the teller, was beginning to treat her like a quiet legend. Back for another account adjustment? Evelyn smiled thinly. Something like that. With Harold's backing, the funds cleared within 48 hours. The new bid, precisely $1 higher than Mark's, went through under Lakeside Retreat Holdings, LLC. The listing disappeared from the site the next morning. June was the first to see it. Status, pending sale, she read aloud, tapping the screen. That's you, honey. You're the pending sale. Evelyn didn't grin, but her eyes gleamed. They'll find out soon enough. Closing day. The real estate office smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and tension. Snowmelt dripped from boots near the door. Harold sat beside Evelyn, reviewing the final documents with his usual precision. Ethan waited near the window, hands in his jacket pockets, trying to look neutral. Across the hall, raised voices echoed, the kind that carry entitlement like perfume. Lauren's voice pierced the air first. We were supposed to meet the buyer. This is ridiculous. Mark followed, trying to sound composed. There must be some misunderstanding. We have rights to first refusal under the family LLC. The agent at the reception desk tried to placate them. I'm sorry, but the transaction's already in progress. The buyer has arrived. Evelyn turned the pen in her fingers, feeling the cool metal against her skin. She could hear Lauren's heels before she saw her, the sharp rhythm of a woman used to walking into rooms expecting apologies. When Lauren rounded the doorway and saw her mother seated at the table, she froze. Mom? The word cracked mid-syllable. What is this? Evelyn didn't look up from the deed. Signing papers. You might remember how that works. Lauren stepped closer, eyes darting between her, Harold, and the stack of closing documents. You can't. This is our property, Harold cleared his throat. Correction, it was your property. As of 10 minutes ago, it belongs to Lakeside Retreat Holdings. Mark blanched. And who exactly owns that? Evelyn finally looked up, her expression calm, almost kind. I do. The silence that followed felt thick enough to touch. Lauren's face went pale, then flushed red. You went behind our backs? After everything, after you left me on the side of a highway, Evelyn interrupted quietly. Yes, Lauren, after that. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, caught between guilt and pride. Mom, Grandma's just taking back what's hers. Maybe it's time you let her. Lauren turned to him, betrayal flashing in her eyes. You helped her? I told the truth, he said simply. Harold stood, sliding the signed deed into its envelope. And with that, Mrs. Hale, he said formally, you now own the place where they abandoned you. Evelyn placed the pen down carefully, her signature drawing dark and final. Then let's make sure they can never use it again. Mark slammed his palm on the table. You'll regret this. Evelyn met his gaze without flinching, doubtful. Outside, the afternoon light cut through the clouds, striking the lake in a flare of gold. The snow had stopped. The water glimmered like polished steel. Ethan walked beside his grandmother, the deed folder tucked under her arm. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Evelyn smiled, small but certain. Now I decide what that cabin stands for. She glanced back toward the office windows, where Lauren stood staring after her, mouth moving soundlessly behind the glass. Evelyn adjusted her scarf and kept walking. They built it on my dime, she murmured, but I'll rebuild it on my terms. The wind shifted off the lake, carrying a faint scent of pine and thawing earth. Behind her, Harold locked the office door and joined them on the sidewalk. That's that, he said. Paperwork filed, sale recorded, and ownership absolute. Evelyn nodded, the ghost of a smile curling her lips. Then it's time I turned it into something they can't exploit. The wind caught her words and carried them toward the frozen shoreline, where the cabin waited. Hers now, in name, in law, and in story. And across town, in a house that suddenly felt smaller, Lauren Hale opened her email to find the deed transfer notice stamped final. The subject line read, Lakeside Cabin, new ownership confirmed. Her reply never made it past the draft folder. The cabin looked different in winter light. Emptier, humbler, honest. Gone were the pretenses of family getaways and posed photos. The air smelled of cedar, old pine cleaner, and snowmelt. Evelyn stood at the center of the main room, her breath visible, her gloved hand brushing a faint watermark on the mantel where a framed Hale family cabin plaque once hung. She'd had it removed the first day. Ethan was stacking boxes near the door, cheeks pink from cold. What do you want to call it? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Outside, the lake shone through the frost-dusted windows, silver and distant. Something that means rest, she said finally. Not for them, for people who actually deserve it. Like the caregivers you used to help at the clinic, Evelyn nodded. A place where people who've done all the giving finally get a weekend to breathe. He smiled. That's pretty poetic for you. Practical, she corrected. Poetic is what got me into this mess. Back in Madison, Harold handled the filings while Evelyn worked late into the night, drafting a proposal on her aging laptop. Lakeside Respite Program. 2 nights at cost for caregivers and low-income seniors. Volunteers welcome. She kept the tone formal, modest, impossible to misconstrue. June edited the grammar. You're turning that cabin into a ministry, she said, half admiring, half incredulous. Into purpose, Evelyn said. They used it for leisure. I'll use it for recovery. Harold dropped by the next morning, overcoat still dusted with snow. He set a folder on her table. Here's the LLC paperwork. I filed everything with the county clerk, airtight now. Not even your daughter could pry it open with a crowbar. Evelyn smiled faintly. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all week. By March, the transformation was underway. Ethan helped sand down the old porch rail. Volunteers from the community diner cleaned the interior. Someone donated quilts, another brought coffee urns. Evelyn oversaw everything with quiet precision, keeping a running checklist on a clipboard. Smoke alarms tested, pantry stocked, Wi-Fi password posted. When the first article appeared in the Madison Chronicle, it wasn't even her idea. The reporter had heard about a 73-year-old woman who turned a family feud into a nonprofit. The headline read, From Betrayal to Benevolence, Local Woman Opens Cabin for Caregivers. The accompanying photo showed Evelyn in her work gloves, standing in front of the refurnished cabin with Ethan and June beside her. Her smile was small but real. The story spread fast, shared online by people who liked the symmetry of it all. The woman, who'd been left behind, had built a sanctuary for others left unseen. Across town, Lauren scrolled through the article at her kitchen table, her coffee going cold. The comments section glowed with admiration for her mother. What a woman. Imagine having her as your mom. Mark slammed his laptop shut. She's making us look like villains. Lauren stared at her phone screen, jaw clenched. We don't have to look like them, she whispered. She's painting us that way herself. But when she called old friends for sympathy, the tone had shifted. Some avoided her calls altogether. Others sent cautious texts. You should be proud of her, Lauren. Pride wasn't what Lauren felt. It was panic. The open house was held the first weekend of spring thaw. The snow had melted into soft earth, and the lake rippled free for the first time in months. Folding chairs lined the front lawn. A local pastor gave a short blessing. Evelyn stood at the entrance in her best wool coat, greeting guests as they entered. The mayor's assistant, a retired nurse, 2 teachers, and even a few of her old clinic co-workers. Ethan poured cider beside a sign that read, "The Lakeside Respite, for those who care." Inside, laughter mingled with the smell of cinnamon rolls. June made sure everyone signed the guest book. Every signature another layer of validation. Harold raised a toast during his short speech. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like restoration. Evelyn Hale has given this town something rare. Proof that dignity can be rebuilt. Applause filled the room. Evelyn's cheeks flushed pink. She wasn't used to applause. It made her feel visible in a way that both warmed and ached. Afterward, she walked out to the dock, alone for a moment. The water was dark and still. Behind her, the cabin lights glowed golden, reflected in the lake like a second chance. Ethan joined her quietly, hands in his pockets. "You did it," he said. Evelyn exhaled. "Not yet. Doing it means keeping it honest. No ego, no payback." He smiled. "Grandma, this is payback. The good kind." She let herself laugh, the sound small and certain. Maybe so. Later that night, after everyone had left and the last lantern was extinguished, Harold handed her one final document. The official property certificate stamped and notarized. "It's yours," he said. "Irrevocable, filed and recorded." Evelyn ran her hand across the embossed seal, the paper cool beneath her fingers. Then it settled. From across the lake, headlights appeared briefly on the far road, a car idling too long before turning away. Evelyn didn't need to guess whose it was. "Let them look," she whispered, sliding the deed into her folder. "All they'll see now is what I built without them." The wind lifted, carrying her words over the still water, and somewhere beyond the trees, Lauren Hale rolled down her window and stared at the glowing cabin, the one place she could no longer enter, and finally understood what her mother had done. Evelyn turned off the porch light, the sign above it gleaming faintly in the dark. The Lakeside Respite, for those who care. The past was paid in full. The summons arrived in a cream-colored envelope that pretended to be polite. State of Wisconsin's Small Claims Court. Notice of civil action. The handwriting on the return address was Mark's. The accusation inside was Lauren's. Plaintiffs, Lauren Hale and Mark Hale. Defendant, Evelyn M. Hale. Claim, fraudulent acquisition of property through coercion, deceit, and mental manipulation. Evelyn read it at her kitchen table without flinching. Her teacup remained steady, her expression unchanged. She had been preparing for this the way other people prepare for winter, by keeping receipts. June showed up 10 minutes after Evelyn called, hair unbrushed, still in her robe. "They're suing you," she barked, flipping through the packet. "For buying back your own cabin. That's not just low, that's sub-basement behavior." Evelyn allowed herself one dry smile. "I told you they'd try to rewrite the ending." "They're about to learn how well you annotate," June said. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, sharp, impersonal, procedural. Harold's briefcase clicked open with the precision of a lock. Evelyn sat beside him in a dark green suit she hadn't worn since her retirement party. Across the aisle, Lauren fidgeted in a tailored blazer, trying to project competence, while Mark whispered furiously beside her. Ethan sat on the end of the bench, hands clasped. His expression was unreadable. "Just answer what's asked," Harold murmured to Evelyn. "You've already done the heavy lifting. The paper will do the talking." When the bailiff called the case, Lauren shot up, speaking before the judge even settled. Your Honor, my mother's lawyer manipulated her into signing over property she didn't understand. Counselor, the judge interrupted sharply. Is this a formal complaint or a family argument? Lauren blinked. Both? The courtroom chuckled. The judge didn't. Proceed with evidence, he said flatly. Lauren's attorney, a nervous man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, shuffled through exhibits. The plaintiffs alleged that the sale of the Hale cabin was conducted under false pretenses through a shell corporation. Harold leaned forward. We'll stipulate to the shell corporation, Lakeside Retreat Holdings, LLC, entirely legal and properly registered with the state, filed prior to purchase. Transparent banking records available. He slid a folder across the table with a satisfying thunk. Evelyn watched the judge's eyebrows lift slightly as he flipped through the documents. Clean bank transfers, notarized forms, correspondence with the realtor. Every line matched, every signature timed and dated. Lauren tried again. She used my money to buy it out from under us. Harold turned calmly. According to our records, every cent used in the purchase originated from Mrs. Hale's verified accounts and a community-backed line of credit, both in her name only. We have bank confirmations and loan officer testimony available if the court requires. The judge turned to Lauren. Do you have documentation showing otherwise? Lauren's lips parted, but no words came. She turned toward Mark. He fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out a printed screenshot labeled Hale Family Holdings, LLC. Half the field's blank, the filing fee unpaid. The judge frowned. You submitted an incomplete corporate registration form as evidence? Mark swallowed. We were in the process of updating it. Then it's not evidence, the judge said. It's paper. A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom. Evelyn sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, her eyes steady on the judge but never on her daughter. Harold rose. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale brought her ledger, deposit slips, and full transaction records. If necessary, we can demonstrate a clear timeline of ownership and payment. The judge nodded. Enter them into record. Evelyn opened her folder and handed over the binder. The pages were neat, labeled, color-coded. The meticulous work of a mind no one could claim was unfit. June, sitting behind her, whispered to Ethan. That's the sound of a woman winning by decimals. Ethan smiled faintly. When it was his turn, Harold called Ethan as a witness. The boy hesitated for a moment, then stood, walking slowly to the stand. You understand you're under oath? The judge asked. Yes, sir. Tell the court what you saw, Harold said gently. Ethan's voice was calm, if a little strained. I saw my parents use my grandma's card to pay for the cabin and the trip. I saw them laughing about it later, how predictable she was. And I saw her fix what they broke. Lauren's face crumpled, her lips trembling. Ethan. He didn't look at her. You always told me to do the right thing. I am. By the time Harold rested his case, the room had gone still. The judge tapped his pen once, exhaled, and leaned back. I've reviewed the filings and the testimony. There's no evidence of fraud or coercion. What I do see, he said, glancing at Lauren and Mark, is a frivolous suit designed to harass. You'll both provide full financial disclosures within 30 days. Court costs and filing fees are your responsibility. He paused, letting the silence land. Next time you bring a personal feud into my courtroom, you'd better come with something stronger than family gossip. The gavel cracked like thunder. Lauren sat frozen, tears sliding silently down her face. Mark stared at the table. Ethan exhaled for the first time in an hour. Evelyn gathered her binder, sliding each paper into place. Her expression never wavered. As she rose, the judge glanced at her. Mrs. Hale, I wish every citizen kept records half as clean as yours. Habit, she said simply. Some of us like things in order. Outside the courthouse, the March wind cut cold and clean across the plaza. Reporters lingered near the steps, whispering. Evelyn ignored them, walking past with Harold and June at her side. June broke the silence first. So what now? Evelyn looked up at the courthouse dome, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Now, she said, we let the truth earn interest. Harold smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. No caller ID, Just a single text. You humiliated us. This isn't over. Evelyn slipped the phone back without replying. Let them file all the papers they want, she murmured. Mine always get signed first. She walked down the courthouse steps, wind tugging at her scarf, the sound of the gavel still echoing somewhere behind her, sharp, final, and entirely hers. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, an odd kind of cleanliness that never quite hid the human mess inside. It was 2 weeks after the small claims dismissal, and yet here Evelyn was again, summoned for the follow-up hearing Lauren's lawyer had insisted upon. Harold called it a last gasp. Evelyn called it Tuesday. She sat at the defense table, composed as ever, her ledger resting beside her like a trusted witness. Across the aisle, Lauren's posture was stiff with defiance, the mask of composure cracking around the eyes. Mark looked smaller than before, tired, unshaven, the bravado worn thin. The bailiff announced the judge, same one as before. His robe swayed like an exclamation mark of patience tested. Case number 245547. Hale versus Hale, he said, scanning the docket. Petition for reconsideration. I'm told this is not a new case, but rather an attempt to reopen a resolved one. Let's keep that distinction clear. Lauren's attorney rose, voice trembling under the weight of formality. Your Honor, my client simply wished to clarify irregularities in the defendant's financial filings. Clarify? The judge's eyebrow twitched upward. Or retry? The attorney faltered. I'm sure they feel many things, the judge cut in. Unfortunately, feelings don't count as evidence in this courtroom. Continue. Lauren stood abruptly, frustration spilling over. Your Honor, this isn't about feelings. It's about fairness. My mother used hidden accounts to manipulate a sale. Sit down, Mrs. Hale. But, sit. Down. The words landed like the crack of a hammer. Lauren obeyed, color draining from her face. Harold rose calmly. Your Honor, as stated previously, all accounts used in the purchase were declared in full to both the credit union and the title office. You have every ledger entry, every deposit, every notarized statement in your record from last hearing. The judge flipped through a folder, the pages whispering, I've reviewed them. Mrs. Hale's paperwork is more complete than most banks I deal with. He looked up at Evelyn. Frankly, I'm impressed. Evelyn inclined her head. I like things tidy, Your Honor. Indeed, he said, turning back to Lauren. Now, Mrs. Hale, do you have anything new to present? Lauren hesitated, eyes darting toward Mark. He opened his briefcase, revealing nothing useful. A stack of unsigned forms, an unverified email chain, and a half-printed spreadsheet. The judge sighed audibly. Mrs. Hale, these documents are not only incomplete, they're irrelevant. You are dangerously close to contempt for wasting this court's time. Lauren's voice cracked. You're taking her side. The judge leaned forward. I'm taking the side of proof. That's the only side that exists here. A hush fell. Harold closed his briefcase with a soft, satisfied click. The ruling took 5 minutes, but sounded like thunder when it came. The motion to reopen is denied, the judge said firmly. The prior decision stands in full. Furthermore, the plaintiffs will pay 1/3 of the defendant's legal costs for filing a frivolous appeal. Lauren's head snapped up. What? The judge didn't blink. Actions have consequences, Mrs. Hale. Consider this a cheap lesson in restraint. He turned to Evelyn, softening slightly. Mrs. Hale, I don't often see record-keeping used as both shield and sword. You've managed to make it an art. Evelyn's lips curved just enough to qualify as a smile. I was just keeping track, Your Honor. That's all I've ever done right. By the time the session adjourned, word had already started leaking into the community. Someone at the courthouse posted the summary docket online. Hale v. Hale, dismissed with prejudice. Costs awarded to defendant. Within a day, the story spread. Local gossip spun it into a fable about the bookkeeper grandmother who outlawyered her own daughter. Donations to the Lakeside Respite doubled overnight. A retired teacher offered to host yoga classes there. The diner held a fundraiser brunch, pancakes for caregivers, with Evelyn's face, mid-laugh, printed on the flyers. Lauren's friends, the ones who'd once shared her posts, quietly unfollowed her. Mark started applying for work again. The silence from across town was almost peaceful. That afternoon, Ethan found his grandmother standing on the courthouse steps. the wind lifting the edges of her scarf. She was staring up at the limestone columns, as if committing them to memory. "You okay?" he asked softly. Evelyn exhaled through her nose, a sound that was almost a laugh. "I think I just retired again," he grinned. "You already did, Grandma. Not from this." She gestured toward the courthouse. "This was a full-time job, keeping the truth on its feet." He nodded, falling into step beside her. For a long moment, they just stood there watching the traffic crawl by, the lake glinting in the distance. Ethan's voice broke the quiet. "I'm proud of you." She turned to him, studying the boy who'd once been too afraid to speak against his parents. "You should be proud of yourself. You remembered what mattered." He smiled, a little unsure. "So, what now?" Evelyn looked toward the horizon, where the courthouse dome met the pale March sky. "Now I start forgiving myself," she said, "for waiting this long to stop them." Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. An unknown number, the text preview visible just long enough for Ethan to glimpse it. "Enjoy your victory, Mom. We're not finished." Evelyn locked the screen without a word and slipped the phone away. "Grandma?" Ethan asked quietly. She smiled, the kind that could cut glass. "Then neither am I." The wind off Lake Mendota swept between them, carrying her words out over the courthouse steps, steady, cold, and unstoppable. The video began on a windy afternoon, shaky and overlit, Lauren's tearful face framed by the car's interior light. She looked into the camera, mascara smudged, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "You all think my mother's some kind of hero. You don't know what she's done. You don't know what it's like to watch someone you love, someone losing her mind, get manipulated into turning her own family out." Behind her, Mark stared grimly at the windshield, nodding like an understudy who didn't want to be on stage. Lauren continued, the rhythm of desperation taking hold. "She's been hiding things. She forged documents. She's not well, but everyone's treating me like the villain because she's playing the victim." She sniffled, wiped at her eyes, and turned the phone slightly, as if trying to capture sincerity from a better angle. "All I ever did was try to protect her, but people like to believe the neat little story, the poor, betrayed grandma. They don't see what's really happening." The video cut off abruptly when a gust of wind slammed the car door, shaking the camera. By nightfall, it had been viewed 40,000 times. Evelyn didn't see it until the next morning, when June arrived waving her phone like it was a live grenade. "It's everywhere," she said. "Facebook, TikTok, that local Madison gossip page. Even the Chronicle posted a link before realizing it was slander." Evelyn took a slow sip of coffee. "And what am I supposed to do about it? Record a rebuttal?" June hesitated. "You could issue a statement." Evelyn shook her head. "No. Statements are what guilty people make. I'll let her talk herself hoarse. I've got a weekend to prepare for." "What weekend?" "The caregiver's retreat," Evelyn said, rising from her chair. "Our first one. 6 guests. All confirmed." June stared at her, then smiled despite herself. "You're a better woman than I am." "I'm just a busy one." That Saturday, volunteers began arriving at the cabin. Teachers, nurses, retired social workers. The driveway filled with parked cars, the air thick with laughter and the scent of brewed coffee. Ethan unloaded bags of groceries while a local florist hung a hand-painted sign above the porch. "Welcome caregivers. You deserve the rest." Inside, the fireplace crackled. The long dining table was set with mismatched mugs and cinnamon bread donated by the diner. Evelyn moved among the guests, offering tea and directions, her calm presence an anchor amid the chatter. She could feel the eyes of the local news crew from the Chronicle who'd shown up uninvited, but politely curious. "We just wanted to feature the program," the reporter said. "Show people something hopeful." Evelyn nodded. "Show them the people who keep others standing. That's all I ask." When the segment aired that evening, it was a simple 2-minute piece. A wide shot of the cabin under soft morning light, a few interviews with grateful guests, and a closing line that caught the town by the heart. Evelyn Hale turned the sight of her family's betrayal into a place of healing. The same algorithm that had fueled Lauren's rage now carried Evelyn's grace twice as far. Within 24 hours, donations poured in. Checks from strangers, gift cards, offers to cover meals for future retreats. Meanwhile, Lauren's live stream began to backfire. Viewers dissected her contradictions, questioned her motives, and compared her anger to Evelyn's calm silence. "If your mom's really unstable," one commenter wrote, "why does she seem like the only adult here?" The balance had shifted, irrevocably. 2 days later, Harold arrived at the cabin with a folder. "Final ruling came down this morning," he said, handing it to Evelyn. "Judge ordered your daughter to retract all public statements or face contempt." Evelyn took the paper, read it once, and folded it neatly. "He didn't have to do that." "He wanted to," Harold said, smiling. "Said he was tired of seeing your name dragged through bad grammar on the internet." June laughed from the porch. "Justice, the 21st century edition." Evelyn slipped the order into her ledger. "Then we'll file it under closure." Ethan found his mother's latest voicemail waiting when he checked his phone that night. Her voice was brittle. "You've turned your back on us, Ethan. You've humiliated your family. I hope you're happy helping her ruin what's left of ours." He deleted it without hesitation and walked outside, where the lake shimmered with late spring light. Evelyn was sitting by the fire pit, a blanket around her shoulders, watching the guests laugh inside. He sat beside her. "Mom's at it again," he said. "I figured. I think I'm done choosing sides," he said quietly. "There's really only one that feels right." Evelyn didn't answer right away. The crackle of the fire filled the space between them. "It's not about sides anymore, Ethan. It's about peace. You can't win peace. You make it." He nodded, but she could see the tears welling in his eyes, a boy caught between relief and grief. She reached over, squeezed his hand once, and let go. Behind them, laughter floated through the open cabin windows. The world outside was calm for the first time in years. Evelyn looked toward the water, its surface glassy and endless, and whispered to herself, "Silence does the talking now." A lone notification buzzed on her phone. Lauren's live stream had been taken down for violating community guidelines. She smiled faintly, watching the flames dance higher. "Some things," she said softly, "burn themselves out." The envelope from Harold arrived on a Wednesday morning, thick with paperwork and the faint scent of printer ink. Evelyn slid it open with her usual precision. Inside were copies of his formal opposition to Lauren's latest filing, an emergency appeal that had arrived half-formed and frantic, like every other attempt they'd made to claw back what was already gone. She read the first page slowly, lips tightening at the phrasing. Plaintiffs request immediate injunction against further disposition of disputed property pending appeal. "Disputed," she murmured, shaking her head. "That word does a lot of work for them." June appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Still fighting smoke with paperwork?" Evelyn handed her one of the pages. "Smoke catches on paper, too. I just happened to write cleaner." June skimmed it, snorted. "They're claiming emotional distress from seeing your name in the news. I'd call that karma with a stamp on it." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Harold's already filed opposition. Everything notarized, time-stamped, and sealed. He said my records will outlive us all." June raised her mug in mock salute. "To immortality through bureaucracy." At the county clerk's office, the paper trail had turned into something almost sacred. Clerks, mostly younger staffers who had grown up seeing Evelyn's story online, passed her forms carefully with a kind of reverence. One woman whispered as she slid over a document, "We've been getting letters, dozens of them, people thanking you for what you did. Caregivers from other counties. Some even attached donations to your name." Evelyn blinked. "Letters?" The clerk smiled. "We've stacked them in the back room. Want to see?" When she did, her throat tightened. Envelopes from strangers, handwritten, typed, some shaky with age, piled into neat towers on a folding table. "Thank you for giving people like me a place to rest. You remind me of my own mom. The world needs more of your kind of revenge." She ran her fingers lightly across the edges, the rustle of paper like a slow collective applause. Harold's voice carried from behind her. "They're not just supporting your case, they're keeping it safe. Public goodwill is a better shield than any injunction." Evelyn turned. "So the judge will see this?" "Every last one," he said. "He's already denied their request for emergency relief. Your records, your title, your trust, all untouchable. Now." The weeks that followed fell into a quiet rhythm of purpose. The Lakeside Respite had grown into a small, self-sustaining network of helpers, volunteers running weekend stays for nurses, hospice workers, and retirees. The old cabin that once held her family's entitlement now hummed with gratitude and renewal. Evelyn spent her mornings tending to details, confirming schedules, logging donations, handwriting thank you notes. Each envelope she sealed felt like an act of reclamation. June visited almost daily, wielding sarcasm like a walking cane. You realize, don't you, that you've outlasted their drama with kindness? Kindness, Evelyn replied, checking off a ledger entry, with structure. June chuckled. You taught a lesson with kindness. They learned it with bills. Evelyn laughed softly. Interest compounded. Across town, Lauren's appeal evaporated. The court dismissed it without a hearing. Insufficient grounds. The filing fees hit hard, and the attorney who'd once tolerated her frantic calls stopped answering altogether. Even Mark, weary and newly unemployed, began murmuring about selling the house. Their names slipped from conversation. Evelyn's didn't. On an April afternoon, Ethan arrived at the cabin with a fat envelope in his hand, his grin so wide it barely fit through the door. College acceptance, he said, voice shaking a little. UW-Madison, Business and Community Leadership. Evelyn froze for half a second, then smiled. A slow, proud thing that softened her whole face. You're going to do what I did backward, she said. Build first, fight second. He opened the acceptance packet and placed it carefully on her desk beside the ledger. You said you'd help if I stayed honest. I did, she said, pulling open her drawer. Inside sat the trust paperwork Harold had finalized months earlier, her conditional plan, ready and waiting. And you have, she slid it toward him. This covers tuition, housing, and something extra. You'll know what to do with it when the time comes. Ethan stared at the forms, swallowing hard. Grandma, you don't have to. I already did, she interrupted gently. And I kept the receipts. He laughed, blinking back tears. Of course you did. That evening, after Ethan left, Evelyn walked the cabin grounds as the sun dipped behind the pines. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and distant lilacs. She paused at the edge of the lake, where a breeze lifted the water in small ripples. From her coat pocket, she took out a single page, one of Harold's certified filings, and folded it neatly before tucking it into the hollow of an old birch tree by the shore. Just insurance, she murmured to the wind, in case the world forgets. The lake caught the last of the light, turning it to gold. In the distance, she could see headlights on the far road again, brief, hesitant, gone before she could name them. She turned back toward the glowing windows of the cabin, where voices and laughter spilled through the air, steady as a heartbeat. Evelyn smiled, whispering to herself, everything that mattered, I wrote down. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A new notification. Appeal dismissed. Case closed. And with that, she finally exhaled. The knock came on a quiet Sunday morning, just as sunlight poured through the birch trees and caught the lakeside respite, for those who care sign, in a soft, forgiving glow. Evelyn was in the kitchen sorting volunteer forms when the sound reached her. A hesitant, uneven rhythm that didn't belong to neighbors or delivery drivers. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Lauren and Mark stood there. They looked smaller than she remembered, Mark with graying stubble and a hollow stare. Lauren pale and drawn beneath too much makeup, her confidence long since spent. A faint smell of road dust and exhaustion hung between them. Lauren tried for a smile. It failed. Hi, Mom. Evelyn said nothing, letting the silence stretch just long enough to remind them whose doorstep they stood on. Mark cleared his throat. We were driving by. Thought we'd stop in. 6 months late for that, Evelyn said. Her tone even, her eyes unreadable. Lauren's hands twisted together. We've been through a lot. Things got out of hand. I shouldn't have said those things. Any of it. Then why did you? Evelyn asked softly. Lauren's voice faltered. Because I thought I was losing control. Of you, of everything, and I was angry. Evelyn nodded once. You were angry that I stopped being predictable. Mark stepped forward, his voice brittle with false composure. Look, Mrs. Hale, we're sorry, we messed up. Maybe we could start over? Work something out with the property, maybe. Evelyn raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. You don't need to finish that thought. They stood in awkward silence. the sound of the lake carrying faintly through the trees. Evelyn glanced past them. Lauren's car sat in the gravel, dusted with pollen, the same way her own suitcase once sat abandoned on the roadside. "Come inside," she said finally, but only for a moment. Inside, the cabin glowed with morning warmth, fresh coffee, pine wood, and the quiet energy of a place at peace with itself. Photos of volunteers lined one wall, nurses, caregivers, and retired teachers smiling on the porch. The air carried no trace of the family that used to claim it. Lauren's eyes darted to the sign-in book on the counter. "You really made this into something," she murmured. "I made it into what it should have been," Evelyn said. "A place that gives more than it takes." Mark tried to smile. "We read about it in the paper. You've got half the town talking." "Yes," Evelyn replied. "But now they're talking about the right things." Lauren swallowed hard. "Mom, I know I can't undo what we did. I thought maybe you'd let us be part of this somehow. Help out, maybe volunteer, just to fix your image?" Evelyn asked. Her voice wasn't cruel, just steady. "You're welcome to apply like everyone else," Lauren blinked. "Apply?" Evelyn walked to a side table, picked up a pamphlet, and handed it to her. Lakeside Respite Volunteer Orientation Packet. The bold header read, "For those who care, not those who take." Lauren looked down at it, her face flushing. "You'd really make me go through a form?" Evelyn met her eyes. "I'd make you earn it. That's how dignity works." Mark looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "We'll think about it." "You should," Evelyn said quietly. "It's good work, hard work, the kind that teaches you who you are." Lauren nodded weakly, eyes glassy, the pamphlet trembling slightly in her hands. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," Evelyn said. "You just didn't care who you hurt until you needed them again." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Evelyn stepped toward the door and opened it wide. "Drive safe," she said. "The road home can be longer than you think." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. Lauren hesitated, as if expecting a last-minute embrace, but Evelyn had already turned back toward the kitchen, where a pot of coffee was brewing. Ethan came in from the garden, wiping his hands on a rag. "Was that them?" "It was," Evelyn said. He glanced toward the departing car. "You all right?" "I am," she said. "They came to take something. I gave them a choice instead." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'd say that's progress." "It's boundaries," she corrected, a quiet steel beneath her tone. By afternoon, the cabin was alive again. Volunteers unpacked supplies for the next retreat. Fresh linens, groceries, stacks of thank you notes from the last group of guests. Harold stood by the registration table, flipping through a folder of finalized paperwork, while June directed a photographer for the local newspaper. The new sign hung proudly over the door, its lettering freshly repainted. "The Lakeside Respite. For those who care." Cameras clicked. The first group of caregivers arrived, weary but smiling, their laughter spilling out onto the porch. Evelyn stepped outside with Harold and June at her side, the sun catching the silver in her hair. "This," Harold said, surveying the crowd, "feels like the end of something." Evelyn smiled. "No," she said. "It's the trip I paid for." June looked puzzled. "Trip?" Evelyn watched the guests filing in, one by one, each carrying the weight of someone else's care. "They left me on the road and took my trip for granted," she said softly, eyes bright with a quiet triumph. "So I came home alone, bought their playground, and turned it into a place they'll never travel on my dime. Again." The lake shimmered behind her, the laughter rising and echoing across the water. Ethan joined her on the porch, the future wide and certain in his stance. Evelyn rested a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady on the horizon. For the first time in a long while, the road ahead was hers, and she didn't owe anyone the gas.